Hey guys, welcome back to part 3 of my C++ series. So today we're going to be going over escape sequences for a little bit, if-else statements, and logical operators. So let's get started with escape sequences. Okay, so escape sequences are little tags that you can add to your cout statements, right? So here's an example one. This is a tab. So before, if we don't have tab, if we don't have the /t, it's just a normal hello world, right? But once we add in the /t, and we print it out, as you can see, the program tabs it in one. You can also have a quote as an escape sequences. So if you want your strings to have a quote on it, you have to do escape sequences, right? If you don't have the escape sequence, which is the /, C++ will interpret it as you ending the string. But you don't want that. You want this to be a part of the string. So you have to have a /, then the escape sequence of the quotes, right? To get quotes into your program. So another escape sequence I can introduce you guys to is the new line. So new line does the exact same thing as the end line one. So as you can see, if I print out another line, right? If I remove this, if I print them both out, you can actually see two new lines between them, this one and this one, right? So if I take out one out and I just end the statement, and let's print it out. So as you can see right here, this new line functions exactly like a regular end line. So now let's talk about comparison operators. So comparison operators are mostly used inside if-else statements. So if you want to compare two variables or two letters or like two characters, strings or whatever, you can use the comparison operator. So what I'm doing here is I'm initializing two variables. So you can initialize variables like this, where you can just do like int and then one variable and then another variable with a comma between them, right? Or you can also do it like this, which is the same thing, right? What we're doing here is just a shorthand version of I just showed you. So what we're doing here is that we want to tell the user to take in a number, right? Two numbers, which we would then assign to number 1 and number 2. So now let's talk about comparisons. So to talk about comparisons, we need to talk about a little about if-else statements. So if-else statements are conditional operators. So if something is true, it would then do it, right? Or if something is false, it would then do another thing. So what we do here is that we call an if statement, and we have our conditional inside this parentheses, inside of this if statement, right? So what we want to check here is that we want to check if number 1 is equal to number 2, right? So the way we do that is that we will use two equal signs, because remember, one equal sign is assigning it, two equal sign is checking if it's equivalent. So what we do here is that we're checking if it's equal to each other, right? So we have a statement, which this would trigger if this condition is true. So inside of your if statement, if you only have one thing that needs to be done, you don't have to have curly braces. But if you are going to do more than one thing, like here, if you're going to see out two things, you have to have curly braces. And if this is false, right? So if this is false, the inside part won't trigger. So you need to have an else statement, just in case if something goes wrong or something, you can then say it's not equal to. So if number 1 is equal to number 2, it will print out equals. But if it's not, so this part doesn't trigger, it will print out not equals, right? So let's run it and see. So here it's going to ask us to enter in two numbers. So let's enter in 5 and let's enter in 4. As you can see right here, it prints out not equal, because this part triggers and this part, since this part is false, which is 4 and 5, this part triggers. So let's see if we put out 5 and 5. As you can see right here, it prints out equals. The reason it prints out equals is because this condition is satisfied, so it moves inside it. We can also use different comparison operators, right? So instead of a regular equals to, like checking if they're equivalent, we can also do a greater than or equal to. So if we're checking if number 1 is greater than or equal to number 2. Or we can also do a less than and equal to, right? To check if number 1 is less than or equal to. Or we can just do a plain less than or greater than, right? Another one we can do is that if they're not equal to each other. So basically we're checking for the opposite. If number 1 is not equal to number 2, then we will run this. Okay, so let's move on. So let's do another if statement. So let's check if number 1 is equal to the integer 1. If number 2 is equal to number 2, right? So a special keyword we're invoking here is the OR keyword. What we're saying is that if this is true or this is true, it will trigger. So only one side of this needs to be true for this to be true, right? So if number 1 is true and number 2 is false, it will still run this. Only way for this to be false is both number 1 and number 2 are not equal to their respective value, right? So that's what an OR statement is. Only one side needs to be true and the other side doesn't need to be true. So that's what an OR statement is. Only one side needs to be true. So let's talk about a AND statement, right? So an AND statement is completely different. An AND statement needs both sides to be true for it to trigger on the inside. And if one side is true and the other side is false, it will automatically become false. So the only way for this to become true is if both sides are equal to true. While in an OR statement, it can only be false when both of these are false. So let's test it out. So in our program, we're checking OR, right? So only one of these needs to be true. So we just enter in 1 and let's enter in 5. As you can see right here, it prints out true. Now let's test out, let's make number 1 equal to 5 and number 2 equals to 5. It should print out false now because both of these conditions were not satisfied, so it prints out the else statement. the false. Now let's check the and statement, right? So let's go back to and let's print it out. So an and statement needs both number 1 be equal to 1 and number 2 be equal to 2, right? So let's give it that. Let's give it 1 and let's give it 2. As you see right here, it prints out true. But let's say we give it 5 and 5 again. 5 and 5. Both of these are false, so it's automatically false, right? But let's say we want to give one of them is true and one of them is false. So 1 and 5, as you can see right here, it prints out false again. The reason it prints out false again is because both of these conditions needs to be true, not just one, for an and statement to trigger. Okay, so let's talk about how to chain if-else statements. So here in C++, you can chain them using an if, else if, and an else statement, right? So the way you would do that is first you have an if statement, right? Where you would check something. So let's check number is equal to 1, right? And here we have to say something. So let's print out number 1. So here we can have another case, right? Where number is equal to like 2. So we can just have an else statement and then we check if number is equal to 2. So basically what we're doing here is that we want to check up here. If this is false, we then do down here, right? But down here, we check if number is equal to 2. So we can also have another one where we check if the number is like greater than or equal to 3. And we print out something, let's say like bigger than 3, right? Then finally, we can have a else statement. So this else statement will be like the default. So if none of these trigger, this final one will trigger, right? So then we'll just print out like not found. So let's run this and let's see. Let's pick number 1. It should print out back 1, right? And now let's print out 5. It should print out bigger than 3. Let's try -5. It'll say not found because none of these conditions were satisfied. So the else statement triggered, right? Okay, so that's going to be it for today. Thank you guys for watching. Bye bye.